Greetings and welcome to your first briefing in GBS Advanced English at Sunshine University. We're going through the Jazz English 1 textbook, and today we're going to be talking about family. Now, family in Korean is a very complicated and specific understanding. Once you know the terms for Korean family, you know exactly where somebody is within your family. In English, it's a lot simpler. We don't have the range of familial ties that they do in Korean. For English, all you need to learn is 2 generations away from where you are. What does that mean with the generation? Generation is one age group above or below where you are. In other words, the people that are the same age as your mother and father is one generation. The people that will be the same age as your son or daughter, that will be another generation. So in English, learning familial ties is only as important as learning 2 generations away from you. Going up from you, we'll start with your mother and father. Now, your mother and father, they would have brothers and sisters, which would become your aunts or uncles. It does not matter whether they are your father's excuse me, brother or sister or your mother's brother and sister. We use the same term for them. It also does not matter if the aunt is married, whether your aunt is related to your father or your uncle is related to your father. We still use the same terms of aunt and uncle with those individuals. Going to their parents, mother and father, would become your grandparents, grandmother or grandfather. And that's as far up the chain of your family tree that you have to really understand. Your grandmother's brother or sister would be your grand uncle or your grand aunt. The same works going down the family tree from to your children. Your children will become your son or daughter. From there, their son or daughter will become your grandson or your granddaughter. From there, you've got 2 generations either side of you, and that's where the terms pretty much end. You do have your cousins, which would be the son or daughter of your aunt or uncle, but those are your generation. If you go beyond 2 generations, say we go to your grandmother's father, then all we do is we add the word great to grandfather to indicate the next generation up. So if you are talking about your grandmother's grandmother, that would be your great-great-great-grandmother. Same works for your grandson or granddaughter, which if you're alive long enough to see your great-great-grandchild, you're probably going to be pretty old or having kids at a very young age. When you do have a brother or sister, and your brother or sister happens to have a child, that child would become either your niece or your nephew, depending on whether they are a nephew, a male child, or a niece, a female child. And that is all the terms that are really important in a family tree in English. There are other terms, second cousin, distant relatives, and these terms are important, but they are not common everyday speech words. Grandmother, grandfather, uncle, aunt, cousin, niece, nephew, son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter are the most common. Talking about distant relatives, great-grandparents, that is also pretty common in English. Moving on, we're talking about some things that happen in a family. Let's say a family has A divorce, say a family ends up in a divorce. If your parents get remarried, then the person that they would marry would become your step, whatever position they are. So let's say your mother and father were divorced, your mother remarried, the man that she marries would become your stepfather. And if your father remarried, that woman would become your stepmother. If they have any children that come into the marriage, meaning the child was already born and then they got married, that child would then be your stepbrother or your stepsister. Step indicates that the marriage occurred and the child was already born. A different would be your mother and your stepfather get married or are married and then have another child. This child becomes your half brother or your half sister. Half indicates that one of the relatives that had this child is also related to you by blood. Not by law, but by blood. So a half brother or a half sister would be that your mother or your father was married to somebody else and then had you, or the other way around. There are some other connections in families. For example, let's talk about children. In children, you have your brothers and sisters. And you have your older brother or your younger brother. Older sister, younger sister. There's no difference in terminology except for adding older or younger to your title of brother or sister to indicate whether they are a year older, 2 years older, 5 years older. Doesn't matter. When a child is born and that child is one of two, meaning they're born at the same time, we call those twins. And there are 3 different types of twins. The first one is identical twins. Identical twins mean that when they're born, they look the same. They are both the same handed, meaning they both use the right hand. And they're both the same gender, both male or both female. There is fraternal twins. Fraternal twins means that the children that are born can be male, but don't look alike. Female, again, don't look alike, or be mixed, male and female. There's one more type of twins, and these are called mirror twins. Mirror twins refer to twins that look alike, but are opposite to each other. One twin would be right-handed, the other twin would be left-handed. This are what usually happens with twins. You either have identical, fraternal, or mirror twins. If they come out and they are conjoined, meaning that they are two people but they are connected, they become conjoined twins. This means that they didn't separate while they were in the womb. But that's for a different subject. Talking about some other things that happen within the family. Divorce. I mentioned that earlier. Divorce is becoming a common thing around the world. People getting married when they're too young and then having second thoughts later on. Divorce was at one time uncommon in America, and it was uncommon in Korea. It's becoming more and more common. Because of that, when asked the simple question, how many people are in your family? Most Westerners are not asking for a count of your mom and dad. They're asking for how many brothers and sisters you have. The reason that they ask it this way is that since divorce has become more common, if you wish to volunteer that information, oh, my parents are divorced or they're separated, that's your personal information and you can choose whether to say it or not. So most of the time when people ask you, how many people are in your family. They want to know your brothers and sisters, not your how many grandparents you still have or how many uncles and aunts and cousins. If they want to know those extra information, they will usually ask, oh, may I ask you about the rest of your family, your extended family? Another thing that happens in American families is children and cousins may not be the exact same age, but they're close in age. Because they're close in age, they play with each other just as they would other friends. It's not a requirement for people to know how old your cousin is or how old their friend is to become friends. Some people can be 1 or 2 years older and still be able to be friends. It is very rare in today's world for American families to live with grandparents. It's not uncommon here in Korea, but it is becoming very rare in the United States to have grandparents living under the same roof or in the same house as the rest of the family. 60 to 70 years ago, this was very common. Now it's becoming less and less common in the United States. It still happens here in Korea, and in Korea, it's more common to have 3 to 4 grandparents that are still alive. In America, most people have 1 to 2 grandparents that are still alive, and some, they don't have any grandparents alive during their lifetime. When you do live at home, and you do live with your brothers and sisters, or your cousins or nieces, sometimes your family members will ask you to babysit. Now, this doesn't mean you take the baby, take them to the chair, put them on the chair, and then you sit on them. No, babysitting refers to watching and taking care of children that are younger than you. Most people here in Korea don't start working jobs until they're 18 or graduate from high school. In America and England and other places, it's very common to have a child about the age of 12, 13 start a part-time job of babysitting, watching younger children. I myself started babysitting when I was 13. I babysat for 4 or 5 years until I got my first part-time job or arbeit. Hello again. All right. Something that's important to note when you're asking people questions about their family. It's not considered a polite topic for most people. If you want to know about people's family or information regarding their personal lives, it's appropriate to ask, may I ask a personal question, or may I ask you some more information? Feel free to say no. Just because you feel comfortable to talk about your family and talk about your familial relationship with anybody does not mean you have to. You can say, no, I really don't want to talk about that. And that's perfectly fine. Don't say, oh, no, that's secret. That implies that you are hiding something. It's always best to say, I really don't want to talk about that. Or that's not something I want to talk about. That is perfectly fine and acceptable, and most English speakers will respect that and say, oh, okay, and they'll move on to another topic. There are some questions that Korean people ask about family and personal interests that are considered very rude. Asking someone their age in Korea is a very common question, and it's been a way to find out how you address that person here in Korea. In America, England, Australia, it's a very personal question to ask someone how old they are. Best way is just to treat everybody with respect. Treat them the way you would like to be treated. Westerners don't make a connection between age and friends. I personally have friends that are 5, 10, 15 years younger than I am, and 20, 25, 50 years older than I am. It has no importance in a friendship relationship. So don't be offended if they say, I'm not going to tell you how old I am. I'm old enough. Other questions that are things to avoid: people's weight, their height, their religion. These are topics that people don't usually volunteer information about. It's a good idea. Avoid them if you can. If somebody opens up the door, in other words, says, oh, I went to church last weekend, they've given you a way of asking about their religion. If it hasn't been brought up, try to avoid it. That will conclude our briefing for this week. Be sure to look at your workbook and student book through Chapter 1, and I will see you next time.